Welcome back to iProperty Radio with myself, Carol Tallon. You can contact us on social media at iProperty Radio or email hello@ipropertyradio.com. In the Proptech Hot Seat today is Ross Griffin, founder of Kosmos, the digital QS. Ross, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Carl. It's great to be here.
So, Ross, ordinarily you're in the West, but today you're in Denmark. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah. So I guess to explain that a little bit, Kosmos was founded in Copenhagen in Denmark in 2019, and last year we opened an Irish office in Limerick. I'm originally from Limerick, so I'm back and forth between the two. So you happen to catch me in our Copenhagen office today.
Very good, very good. So first of all, as mentioned, Kosmos, the digital QS. Explain to listeners what that is.
Yeah, from our perspective, it's the traditional quantity surveying practice, but focusing on digital information and digital projects, so digital design, kind of embedding ourselves in the architectural and engineering digital design process as a kind of collaborative, integrated member of that team. So rather than the traditional model of waiting for design information to be sent to you on 2D PDF, we're now changing the model slightly where we are ingrained in the design development with the architects and engineers, consistently and continually looking at the development of the 3D information within whatever platform, whether that's Revit or ArchiCAD or whatever, and trying to advise on the quality level of the information in accordance with the BIM execution plan, so that we as QSs can use that information when exported in IFC format into our estimating software to develop cost plans, bills of quantities, and so on. So again, rather than waiting to the end, we're now trying to integrate ourselves in that entire development process.
So from a QS function point of view, what difference does that make to the overall project?
Well, there's a couple of things, right? So first of all, as a QS, we're saying that we're moving away from quantity surveying as a kind of process. We're more quality surveyors now. So we're taking information developed by other disciplines to use within the cost planning, cost estimating. Again, the same as we've always done before, except the information is being developed by other disciplines. It's not the QS's role now to interpret information anymore. It's their role to take that information, to quality assure it, and then to use it. So from that perspective, you're improving the quality of design information from day one, week on week, with the disciplines. And I must reiterate that, with the disciplines, with the architect, with the engineer. So you're adding value to their process as well as they're adding value to your process.
Okay, something that I ask most of our guests on the show is, because I'm particularly those involved in projects outside of Ireland, because I think it's really important for the Irish industry to be honest about assessing where it is in terms of digital adoption. So given your experience, not just in Denmark, but obviously you work on international projects, where do you think Ireland lies in terms of digital adoption?
I guess there's two areas to that. One, as a national industry, I would say that we are absolute laggers in our processes and our adoption of digital design and digital as a national industry when compared to Denmark. For example, in 2008, the Danish government brought in their first BIM initiative. It has been updated in 2012, 2015, and again recently. So they have now gone through what will be kind of 15 years of digital progression within the industry nationally. Now, of course, we have companies that are well ahead in terms of a global level within Ireland, but that is very, very challenging for companies when working on a national level with different stakeholder groups with different knowledge bases and level of experience. So again, in a national level, I'd say we were for sure we're well behind when compared to Denmark, for example.
Okay, and but then I'm sure you're aware of initiatives like, for example, Build Digital and other initiatives by the state, supplemented by the private sector, of course, in terms of driving digital adoption in
Yep.
terms of, you know, offsite and other modern methods
Yep.
of construction. And actually, whenever we speak to anybody across the MMC chain, they all say the same thing, and that is it comes back to being involved at early design stage. So we know that pre-construction is where the wins are to be gained. It's where we need to
100%.
focus on. It's possibly not where the traditional industry is focused on right now, but it's where we need to get to for best
Yep.
practice. But looking at the experiences that you've seen in the Danish market over the past number of years, you know, what have you learned there that maybe you're not seeing in the Irish marketplace?
The BIM mandate that is government driven, that is implemented and managed, that needs to happen for starters. We will never catch up or be at the level that countries like Denmark are without a BIM mandate for public projects. Public investment is the largest in any country. They also have the diversity in projects from small to medium to large, and they have the finance to back up the development, not the development of the asset itself, the physical asset, but the development and the learning of for all stakeholder groups within that project to increase their knowledge base within digital design and digital delivery. So we need pilot projects driven by government that are BIM mandated and that are managed relating to that BIM mandate. So until we have that, I think we will continually struggle as a national industry to bring up everybody, including SMEs and the supply chain, in that digital workflow and digital way of thinking and so on projects.
You know, it's interesting when BIM was mandated across all UK projects years ago, you know, there was almost an assumption in the industry that that's what would happen in Ireland, and that hasn't been the case. And we see now, while there's been huge progress made over the last 2 years, it's very academic, and it's academic led, which obviously will have a knock-on effect as we're training the next generation of experts. But is enough being done, I suppose, at industry level? So, for example, you're talking about the state needing to take the lead in bringing in emerging technologies and existing technologies, but there's an element of risk in that. So the state isn't set up to understand, to assume risk. So how do we get around that?
That's, you have a huge challenge there, right? So there is an element of risk in it, but risk at the end of the day is cost, right? So either it's time or it's capex, and they need to set aside capex to allow projects to be development projects when it comes to digital advances and so on. So government need to make a decision right now. Is that something that they want for the future? And for us as an industry to be competitive internationally, we have to bring the capabilities up of the entire local industry. Otherwise, you will have private companies developing their BIM standards, developing their knowledge bases for the global market rather than the local market, because private sector in itself will only take on BIM partially, to be honest. It really depends, and it's up to developers how they see the value in that. So from a government perspective, they need to set aside a fund for this to keep this going. And the Build Digital project is a great example, but it cannot be an academic task. It has to be practical. We have to bring in the entire supply chain into it. We have to bring in all stakeholders into that development in order to be able to build the knowledge base. And it takes time and it takes years, and we're going to make mistakes. That has to be understood. It's not something we're going to change overnight. If we reflect back to Denmark, we're 15 years in the kind of digital development process in Denmark. All projects are now digital projects in Denmark. All projects that we work with inside in the Danish environment are all BIM projects. We don't have any traditional projects left, and that's almost down to your one-off housing. So all kind of consultants and stakeholders have now transitioned to the digital approach because it's more cost effective. Digital information is easier to work with. In terms of how you procure, it's much easier rather than the traditional models. So it's inevitability that we're now going to have to work towards, but someone has to lead the way, and that has to be government.
Yeah, you know, and it's something that I think, if we're having this conversation in 3 years' time, I wonder, will you be making the same point and we'll still be way off that, just purely because we know the pressure that is on the state to update its procurement models, and yet that doesn't seem to be filtering through. You know, you're talking about the education of the supply chain. And what we've seen, by the way, you know, one thing that I've observed across the construction industry is that there's a widening gap between those who are doing it. They're along the journey of adopting new technologies, and they're bringing their supply chain with them. So it's not a case of the supply chain being left behind. They're bringing them with them. However, there's a huge gap between those who have and those who haven't. And I'm surprised at some of the organizations that haven't, because they're ones that would have been big names in the industry. So actually size isn't an indicator of who's adopting technology at all. And I wonder at what extent does the gap need to be before it becomes a gap that can't be closed?
It'll come down to the international market, to be honest. And we pride ourselves in Ireland about exporting construction skills and minds and companies and so on. Look at the data center industry, for example. That's a case in point. But if we don't become competitive and capable within the digital sphere, we will be left behind. Clients on an international scale will begin to look at digital projects, and we as a supply chain coming out of Ireland will not be able to supply that. That will become a problem for us. And if that becomes a problem, we will not be able to catch up with international industries and international capabilities. The lag behind will be too far to gain for us. It'll take us decades.
That's a really worrying one. So that almost seems like the start of a bigger conversation for another day, but let's bring it back to Kosmos here. I know that your company offering has evolved in recent years. Tell me about, and tell our audience about, Fifth Dimension.
So if we start with Kosmos, our intention was to challenge how we would traditionally deliver projects from a quantity surveying perspective. And because as individuals, we've been working on digital projects for 8 or 9 years now, we could see that on an international market, like in Ireland, for example, if we were considering us as a Danish company, we could see that there's opportunity in these markets where the local supply chain might not have the knowledge and experience on digital projects. So as we were building our kind of standards and standardization within Kosmos, as we started, we want to be a cloud-based kind of quantity surveying. So we're a paperless office. We do not print paper. Everything is digital, whether it's 2D measurement or 3D measurement, it's all digital. And what we realized and we noticed this over the last number of years, was 2 things. We're very dependent on Excel as a platform or software to manage construction budgets and economies and reporting and so on. And Excel is a very manual platform. It's kind of like the pen and paper of the olden days. We've shifted through now. Yes, we're all digitized using Excel, but the next layer is coming. And the second thing we realized is that companies don't have databases. Companies don't have cost databases. They haven't standardized enough yet. And what we realized was, when we started investigating the availability of software out there for quantity surveyors in particular, and for companies that understand kind of the quantity surveying practices, is that there isn't a specific or focused software that allows QSs to report digitally, to collect cost information in a standard structured format, and then to analyze that cost information across the different portfolios that they might have, or the different building types or subtypes and so on. And the introduction of ICMS, International Construction Measurement Standards, a number of years ago, has now allowed us on a global scale to standardize our cost structures, and then being able to analyze cost information not only on a national level, but across borders on an international level. And it's something we're working with one of our clients with at the moment on their projects on an international scale, is because we're using standardized cost structures, because we're using standardized approach to our cost planning, bills of quantities, cost control, so on, it allows us now to look across their entire global portfolio and to really challenge what has been designed and delivered by local teams in terms of the solutions from a commercial perspective, to add more value into their projects, to add more value into their delivery, and hopefully increase their return on investment, or offer that cost saving back to the supply chain. So the Fifth Dimension is basically this. It's a cloud-based solution where us as quantity surveyors can load cost information from our estimating tools, and from that the clients can log on to their dashboard viewing level and been able to view within their commercial information relating to either their project, their portfolio, or their entire business. And with that, we're able then to create a national or international database of cost information that can be indexed up to the most recent index, depending on where you are, of course, and being able to then look at value creation for clients, companies, and perhaps again government and local authorities. You know.
Oh, and Ross, you mentioned that in the last year you've opened an Irish office.
Correct.
So who are the clients that you're trying to target? I mean, just from your description, it sounds like this that the target audience here would be across professional QS and construction QS. But obviously, the term stakeholders has broadened hugely, and we know that those employing QS services has broadened hugely over the past decade. So who are your targets in the Irish market?
If from a Kosmos perspective or from a fifth dimension perspective, both. So for us, Kosmos, we're looking for companies that are interested in a delivery of a digital project process. So pre-construction is our focus. As we mentioned when we opened up the conversation, pre-construction is where the value is created. It is the proactive element of construction. During execution, it's reactive. You're dealing with information that has already been created. You're dealing with contracts that have already been structured, and it really is a proactive approach to managing risk and client cost. Whereas in pre-construction, you are managing design quality, contract quality, change management information. So for us, we're looking for kind of strategic partners within the industry, whether that is QS practices looking to kind of improve their knowledge on digital workflows. We would come in and assist them on projects, or developers looking to really change how they deliver their pre-construction projects. That's kind of our focus from a Kosmos perspective. From a fifth dimension perspective, that is kind of any developer or any quantity surveying practice looking to standardize and digitize their commercial information. So I'll give you an example. If you had Limerick City and County Council, or Cork City Council, or Dublin City Council, who have a range of schools, and they've been collecting cost information on their schools for the last 2 decades. Imagine how powerful that is, standardized and being able to analyze automatically when looking at benchmarking for the next schools or the risks for the next schools, because all your risks have been cataloged and categorized and collected digitally. You can run algorithms then that will predict the risk for you and predict the cost of that risk based on that historical information. None of us have that today. And that's what we want to recreate for the future. We want to change what the QS, the quantity surveyor, is. We want to digitize the entire workflow so that we can automate most of the analytics that will allow us to advise our clients more strategically and accurately in the future. So that would be the fifth dimension element, right? Both large developers and local municipalities and governments.
Very good. Just and final question, for clients coming on board with you now, do they need to be a certain distance along the digital transformation journey? Can you bring them along with you?
So we have a couple of clients at the moment that we're developing their digital strategy for them. Now, some companies might think, well, a quantity surveying practice developing a digital strategy, that doesn't really make sense. Isn't that a digital consultant? But we've partnered with digital consultants to deliver these strategies for very large organizations, like global organizations as well, not just national here in Denmark, but global organizations. So we would develop that BIM execution plan, but there's a focus on not just the design, it's the 4D, the 5D, so time and cost, the 6D and 7D, which is sustainability and facilities management, and encapsulating all of that within these strategic documents that allows companies to start from the very beginning of their project and then manage that information development through the design in the pre-construction, through the construction, from that delivery from the contractor, and right up to the digital handover prior to the operation of the building. That all needs to happen early. Otherwise, you need to try and retrofit everything, and that's quite difficult to do. Now, these strategies, they're not that difficult to implement, to be honest. It's about having the right stakeholders around the table to have the conversations that the client needs to have. So the client just needs to kind of have a vision that they want to change from traditional models. They want to digitize their workflow and their information to become more competitive in order to be able to improve their delivery in the future. A small example would be, imagine we have obviously everybody knows we have a housing crisis in Ireland. Imagine we were able to digitize everything we've built back in the Celtic Tiger to understand what our cost per square meter is in all the different building types and housing types that we've had. Imagine we have that today in order to strategize what we should build, where we should build it, and why we should build it. That would be incredibly powerful to us now. So yes, we can't have it retrofitted back over a decade ago, but we can start today for the next generation and the next, push towards residential developments.
Very good. And final question, Ross, what advice, what advice would you have for, say, BIM managers who, whatever about the client, are still facing resistance, maybe from within their own organization?
I would say that it's inevitable. It's coming, regardless. Now, whether it's going to happen within your organization or not, that remains to be seen. But in terms of a global construction market, it's coming regardless, and there will always be work in the future for digital QSs and BIM coordinators for sure, because we're becoming more and more and more digitized as an industry. We know it ourselves from personally, like if you go back 2 decades, look at the phones we carry now. They absolutely have us connected, and everything is relating to that. Everything is now going into your phone, including your credit cards, your key access to your car, your house, everything. So the principles will be the same for construction. We'll digitize the entire project workflow in the future, and who knows where it's going to be, or who knows what it's going to end up, but it is incredibly exciting. So I would say to anybody who's really under pressure at the moment, just bear with it. It's going to change.
Okay, inspiring words. That's great. My thanks to Ross Griffin, founder of Kosmos, the digital QS, and that's it from the Proptech Hot Seat this week. You can get in touch with the show on social media at iPropertyRadio or by emailing hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Until next time, thank you for listening.